Hello, good morning everyone. In this class we are going to discuss two types of pronunciation processes called lenition and fortition. Basically, lenition and fortition are not two single subtypes, but they are classes of, and in fact they have the capacity to have their own subtypes. So certain type of phonological processes can be clubbed together under lenition, and some other types can be clubbed together under fortition. And these two categories have been considered as somehow related to the sonority hierarchy and strength hierarchy. Now, in this class, we are not going to talk about sonority and strength hierarchy, which you can see in a phonology textbook. In this class, from a historical perspective, from a diachronic level of understanding, we are going to see what are the sound changes or processes which can be uh, clubbed together or categorized under lenition and fortition separately. And we will learn about those subtypes as well. Lenition is also known as weakening. This is a definition quoted from Campbell's textbook, who defines lenition as a reasonably loose notion applied to variety of kinds of changes in which the resulting sound after the change is conceived of as how somehow weaker in articulation than the original sound. So whatever sound is resultant after a particular sound change, that resultant sound is somehow weaker in articulation. And we will learn what are weaker sounds and what are stronger sounds. Lenitions, that means lenition is a class of sound changes, as you can clearly identify from this word lenitions. That means certain type of sound changes which are categorized under lenition process or processes. Thus, typically includes changes of stops or affricates to fricatives. So any change that converts a stop or else stop or an affricate to fricative is a kind of a lenition process. Also, those changes which convert two consonants to one, that means if a geminate becomes a non-geminate, that means single tone, or full consonants to glide. So consonants becoming glide is also a lenition process, and sometimes of voiceless consonants to voiced consonant in various environments. So this is a condition change. Not always voiceless consonants are stronger than voiced consonants, but in certain phonologically strong position, voiceless consonants are stronger than voiced, and this is a condition kind of a sound change, and so on. Lenition can also include the complete loss of sound. So if there is a deletion of any particular sound, that you can also regard as a lenition process. Now let's see what are the stronger sounds and what are weaker sounds. Oral stops or any kind of stop are generally regarded as stronger than fricatives or affricates. So stops becoming fricative or affricate will be now considered as lenition process. Consonants are stronger than glides. So consonants, as you know, all those consonants in our IPA chart are stronger than the glides that are y and wa, like these two. Geminates two singletons, so two consecutive uh, uh, sequence of identical sounds becoming one single tone. So ta becoming ta is a lenition process because that becomes weaker. Voiceless consonants becoming voiced consonant is also a lenition only in phonologically weak positions. Okay, so this is a condition change. These three are not condition change. Some examples come from processes like fricativization, deaffrication, degemination, and glide formation. These are classes of sound changes which are categorized as lenition or weakening. Now see what is fricativization. In this process, you can see a plosive becomes a fricative. So as you know, plosives are stronger than fricatives. Now, if a plosive becomes a weaker sound, that is a fricative, this is a fricativization by its name. As a class, it is under lenition. And that happens only if it happens within this kind of a particular environment. And this is a very commonly found type of sound changes or phonological process in languages of the world. So t becomes s within two vowel sounds, that means in intervocalic position, or t becomes s before a obstruent, so minus sonorant. So these are some kind of conditions. These are so very commonly found types of fricativization in cross-linguistic environments. Deaffrication is also a type of lenition where you can see an affricate is becoming a fricative. Okay, in fricativization, a plosive becomes fricative. In deaffrication, a affricate becomes something else, anything else. In this case, an example is given: an affricate is becoming a fricative. Then dissemination, as we know that if there was a geminate, it becomes a non-geminate. So da da becoming da, or da da becoming da, like in the progression from Latin to Portuguese. The word for drop was gutta, but in Portuguese it was gota. So two geminates became a single tone. For another example, kabalu becomes cavallo for horse, and similarly this one, anno becoming anno. So there are other changes are also there in the word, but that is not our focus right now. We are just seeing how geminate becomes a non-geminate or a single tone. Glide formation, there are certain examples where became ya, or pa become wa, etc. So you can see this is an alveolar plosive which became a palatal approximant, and this is a labial plosive which became a labiovelar approximant. So any full consonant becoming a glide is a glide formation. So these are all type of lenition processes. One interesting example comes from Latin to Spanish derivation, where Latin pataka became badaga. But this is again a condition change, as we have already listed in the first slide. Now let's read this. Generally, voiceless stops like pataka are weaker than voice stops, but in phonological strong intervocalic positions, badaga are weaker than bataka. So this is a reversal of the fact that in phonologically strong positions like intervocalic between two vowels, badaga are weaker than pataka. Okay, so this is you have to just remember and get the concept clear. And this is an example from coming from Latin to Spanish derivation. So word from for broom, scopa. This is a pa, but in Spanish it became escoba. So in between two vowels o and a, the pa, which was a voiceless sound, it became a voice sound. Similarly, natare became nadar. So there are other sound changes where a has been inserted here, a had been deleted from this position, etc., etc. But that is not our focus. Amica became amiga. So in between two vowels, ka became ga, ta became da, pa became ba. So this is a lenition process. Now, the opposite of the spectrum is a fortition process, and this is again a class of processes or sound changes which can be categorized as a cluster of different kind of sound changes. Fortition is also known as strengthening. Campbell defines it as the variety of changes which are sometimes referred to as strengthening, as share a loosely defined notion that after the change the resulting sound is somehow stronger in articulation than the original sound was. Some examples of fortition are affrication, gemination, spirantization of glides, only of glides, okay, this is important, Change of fricatives or glides to stops or affricates, and consonant insertions of various sorts. In the previous one, we learned that lenition can be deletion is also a kind of lenition process. If some certain sound is deleted, that means uh, the entire string became weaker. Now, insertion, on the other hand, is regarded as a fortition process, especially consonant insertions. Certain example comes from affrication, as we have listed earlier. So stops like pa, ta, ka became affricates p, ts, h, etc. in some Germanic languages. So any type of change that occurs between stop and affricate is a affrication process. Gemination, on the other hand, as you know by the name itself, that a single tone becomes a geminate in this kind of a situation in some Finnish dialects. So in this case, sir became sir, sir, and ka became ka, ka, etc. in some dialects. Now, there is another fact you may notice in the textbook where you can find that this is a long vowel like a, but that I have ignored for this understanding because we are focusing on the geminate to single tone to geminate part. Spirantization of glides, any glide becoming fricative, ya becoming sa or wa becoming pa or whatever, sorry, not pa, what for, etc., will be spirantization. Now, we have learned about lenition and fortition separately as classes of sound changes, but let's quickly throw some light on the individual sound changes. The beginning is gemination. Let's begin with gemination. As the name itself suggests, doubling of consonants, that is the change which produces a sequence of two identical consonants from a single starting consonant, like in ta becoming ta, ta, etc. So this is an example from Finnish dialect where V, C, V, where the last vowel is a long one, is surfaced as V, C, C, V. That means the consonant in between two vowels had become a double consonant or a geminate. So this is an example of gemination. Degemination, on the other hand, when a sequence of two identical consonants is reduced to a single tone, the change is often called degemination. An example is the change from Latin pa, pa, ta, ta, ka, ka, geminates to Spanish pa, ta, ka respectively, as in mitre became meter. So as you can see, sequence of two consonants, ta, ta, which is a geminate, become single ta, and ka, ka become single ka, etc. So it's a process of degemination. Affrication refers to changes in which a sound, usually a stop, sometimes a fricative, becomes an affricate. For example, t became a fricative ts before a vowel e, or k became s before a vowel e or a. Basically, this happens in front of front vowels. These are quite commonly found in most of the languages. Spirantization or fricativization. What happens in this process? These two names do stand for the same kind of process, where an affricate will be weakened or lenited to a fricative, or a stop will become a fricative. So if there was an original affricate, it will become a fricative, or if it was a stop, it will become a fricative. So this is interesting. Some example comes from this Chusco Quechua language, which belongs to the Quechuan language family, spoken in the Latin American country, as you know, it's Peru. So in this language, syllable final stops become fricatives, like in rapra became rafra, um, and sukta became sukta. So this was a proto word. Okay, so in this case, you saw that pa became fa and ka became ha. Okay, in both the cases, the resultant sound is a fricative sound. So it's a process of fricativization. A common change is the spirantization of stops between vowels, well known in Dravidian languages as well. For example, Proto-Dravidian tapu became Kannada tavu, so pa became va. Va, as you know, it's a fricative. Okay, so stop becoming fricative is a class of sound which come under spiratization, and in turn it is a lenition process. Deaffrication, when an affricate becomes a fricative. So in this case, it's it's also called deaffrication. So in the previous slide, you must have seen that that is also spiratization, but in this case, we are focusing on the original sound, and the original sound was affricate. Now it became something else, and it became a fricative. So you can also say that why not this is a spiratization of fricative. You can say it is a spiratization, but the focus is on the original sound. So an affricate become what? In the previous example, spiratization or uh, you know fricativization, what the focus was on the resultant sound. For example, sir became sh in some of the Spanish areas. In Spanish spoken in areas of Chile and Panama. These are, as you know, Latin American country. Now, Spanish had set up colonies there, and in those colonies, they have, the Spanish had their own regional changes, because they have come into contact with local languages spoken in Chile and Panama and other parts of the Latin American continent. This is also observed in synchronic phonology of Spanish. So this is observed that in speech of the younger people, these kind of changes are more commonly found, and of course there are other sociolinguistic conditions which condition this kind of changes. Now, this is a change where an affricate, which an original affricate became a fricative, is a deaffrication. Lengthening is another type of sound change which refers to the change in which some sounds, usually a vowel, is lengthened in some of the contexts. For example, this language which vowels are lengthened before consonant cluster, which begins with a sonorant. So camque became canque. So because it is preceded, followed by a sonorant consonant. Here, as you can see, it's n, and here in this case you can see l, but it is a condition change only before a consonant cluster where the first consonant is a sonorant. Only in that condition those vowels are lengthened, and this is a simple process called lengthening. Shortening, on the other hand, um, are those changes which shorten them in a variety of contexts, such as word final position or before consonant cluster, and in a position which is an unstressed position, and so on. So in many kind of phonological context, sounds have a particular tendency to become shortened, specifically vowels. If it is a geminate, if it is a consonant, it will be a term that is gemination or degemination, etc. But for vowels, we can't say gemination, degemination. We just have to use these two terms. Lengthening for if a short vowel becomes long vowel, and shortening if a long vowel becomes short vowel. So one example comes from Middle English, where Old English long vowel became Middle English short vowel, like in these words. So capte became capte. So A has been shortened. Holiday had become holiday, etc. So these are some examples of which come under lenition and fortition separately, and we have also talked about the lenition processes and fortition processes separately.